Look at the Matt Gaetz thing. I'm not gonna lie, I know the broad strokes, but I'm not overly familiar with the details, which is why I would like to take a look at some articles about it with you guys. So let's take a look and see what the actual specific allegations are. I know it has to do with moving a 17-year-old across state lines for the purposes of which is illegal. It's a federal felony. So let's take a look. Feds looking at alleged payments Representative Matt Gaetz made to women in online solicitation. The federal investigation targeting Republican Rep. Matt Gaetz is specifically looking into whether he and an associate in his home state of Florida provided cash or other things of value to women they had sex with after connecting online. The New York Times first reported Thursday evening, and a source familiar with the matter confirmed to ABC News. Gaetz' associate, former local politician Joel Greenberg, was indicted last year for allegedly trafficking a teenage girl for sex in 2017. And the Justice Department is also trying to determine whether Gaetz had sex with a 17-year-old, according to sources. Greenberg pleaded not guilty to the charges. The details of the investigation were first reported by the New York Times 2 days after the paper revealed that an investigation was underway. The disclosure has sent shockwaves through Republican circles, particularly among those close associates of the former President Donald Trump, who considered Gaetz a staunch ally and loyal friend. Gaetz' office did not respond to a request for comment, but earlier this week, Gaetz insisted on Fox News that he, quote, never had a relationship with a 17-year-old, calling such allegations totally false, end quote. According to the Times, investigators believe Greenberg met women through certain websites and introduced some of them to Gaetz. As recently as 2019 and 2020, Gaetz and Greenberg told women to meet them at hotels in Florida, laying out how much they were willing to pay beforehand, the newspaper said, adding that party drugs may have also been used by Gaetz and others at the time. Matt Gaetz has never paid for sex, Gaetz' office said in a statement to New York Times. Matt Gaetz refutes all of the disgusting allegations completely. Matt Gaetz has never been on any such websites whatsoever. Matt Gaetz cherishes the relationship in his past and looks forward to marrying the love of his life. Bear in mind, Matt Gaetz is 38 years old, I believe, and the allegations are that he was involved with a 17-year-old girl. Not cool, not legal, not okay. A lawyer for Greenberg did not respond to ABC News' request for comment. Greenberg served a controversial stint as Seminole County tax collector until he resigned last summer following his arrest by federal authorities. Prior to joining Congress, Gaetz was a member of the Florida House of Representatives when his father was also a member of the Florida Senate. Sources told ABC News the two were often referred to as Daddy Gaetz and Baby Gaetz. Ooh. Sources said some women referred to him as Creepy Gaetz because they allegedly found themselves made uncomfortable by the junior lawmaker. Creepy Gaetz. Sources said Gaetz was part of a group of young male lawmakers who created a, quote, game to score their female sexual conquests, which granted points for various targets, such as interns, staffers, or other female colleagues in the state house. Oh, all of these people should resign. What the fuck? That's disgusting. One of the targets of the scoring system was a group the lawmakers had heard were, quote, virgins, according to a source. The scoring system by male Florida lawmakers was previously reported by the Miami Herald. Goddamn. One source said Gaetz was often spotted trying to pick up young women at the 101 restaurant, a once popular watering hole in Tallahassee for some lawmakers and a student from nearby Florida State University. While on Capitol Hill as a member of Congress, Gaetz allegedly boasted of his sexual encounters with women and would actually try to show colleagues photos and videos of naked women he had slept with, according to sources familiar with Gaetz' actions. One video in particular was of a naked woman with a hula hoop, according to a source who was shown the material, an allegation first reported by CNN. Yeah, that's wholly inappropriate. Holy crap, that's disgusting. You're a fucking representative and you're doing that shit on the job? Gaetz' office did not respond for comment. During an interview on Fox News, Gaetz claimed he was being extorted over the investigation and claims that someone had alleged there were false pictures of me with child prostitutes, which he said was obviously fake. Oh, that, in my opinion, means there's definitely photos out there of him with child prostitutes. No one says that unprovoked. Who says that unprovoked? That like, whoa, guys, these alleged photos of me with child prostitutes that no one's heard of until I just said this. Let me tell you, those are fake. No one preempts that, is what I'm trying to say. I hope he goes down. Wouldn't it be hilarious if the QAnon stuff, like, the QAnon stuff isn't real, obviously, but wouldn't it be hilarious if it turned out a bunch of GOP members legitimately were, like, tied into sex trafficking on a grand scale? Similar, but of course not the same to how QAnon people think the Democrats are, but if Republicans actually were, that would be hilarious is a bad word because there would be a lot of victims involved, and that's terrible, but, like, the irony would be unbelievable. There will be no such pictures because no such thing happened, but really on March 16th was when this got going from extortion standpoint, Gaetz said. Gaetz has previously sparked controversy over repeatedly commenting on Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's appearance, calling the New York Congresswoman, quote, attractive multiple times and once referring to her as the attractive lady from Queens. That's gross. She's your colleague. Stop it. Gaetz developed a reputation in the U.S. House of Representatives for often bragging to colleagues about his relationships with women, sources told ABC. Upon his arrival to Washington, sources said Gaetz was often seen with young women at various social events, including at the Trump Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. Gaetz previously told Axios, the allegations of sexual misconduct against me are false. When asked what the Department of Justice probe could be about, he added, quote, I have definitely in my single days provided for women I've dated. You know, I've paid for flights, for hotel rooms. I've been, you know, generous as a partner. I have a feeling that doesn't extend to eating the box. I think someone is trying to make that look criminal when it's not. It is criminal if they're underage and you're sleeping with them. Fun fact. Yeah, that is not the face of a generous lover. Let me tell you that. Anyway, off to the next article. Matt Gaetz' communications director resigns as congressman faces allegations of sexual misconduct. Luke Ball, the communications director for Congressman Matt Gaetz, resigned from his position on Friday amid allegations that Gaetz had inappropriate sexual encounter with a minor and a reported investigation into alleged violations of federal sex trafficking laws. This investigation didn't start under the Biden administration either. This started under Trump. So any chud who's like, this is a political thing that Biden's DOJ is doing to Matt Gaetz because he was an ally of Trump. No, this investigation actually started under Trump's DOJ. So, wrong. The office of Congressman Matt Gaetz and Luke Ball have agreed that it would be best to part ways, Gaetz' office said in a statement. We thank him for his time in our office and we wish him the best moving forward. Ball has worked for Gaetz since February 2017, according to his LinkedIn profile, starting as an intern at the Pensacola, Florida district office and working his way up to become communications director in November 2019. Last year, Ball also founded Right Life Media, a social media marketing company. The resignation came in the wake of scathing New York Times reports saying Gaetz is under investigation by the Justice Department for possible violations of sex trafficking laws. The Times said he'd also been accused of having inappropriate sexual encounters with a 17-year-old girl. Whom Matt's purportedly paid to travel with him. The Justice Department is investigating the situation, including whether Gaetz paid to have sex with women who were recruited online by former Seminole County, Florida tax collector Joel Greenberg, according to the Times. In response to the story, Gaetz' office issued a statement saying the congressman has never paid for sex and refutes all the disgusting allegations completely. Matt Gaetz has never been on such a website whatsoever, the office said. Matt Gaetz chair, blah, 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 blah. We read that in the previous article. Gaetz has called the allegations against him an organized criminal extortion, and he claimed in March 30th tweet that a former Department of Justice official was demanding $25 million and threatening to smear his name. We have been cooperating with federal authorities in this matter, and my father has even been wearing a wire at the FBI's direction to catch these criminals. You know how I know this is bullshit? Because if your dad was wearing a wire for the FBI, you wouldn't say it on national TV. Jesus Christ. The planted leak to the FBI tonight was intended to thwart that investigation, Gaetz said. No part of the allegations against me are true. Justice Department inquiry into Matt Gaetz said to be focused on cash paid to women. This is a New York Times article. A Justice Department investigation into Representative Matt Gaetz, an indicted Florida politician, is focusing on their involvement with multiple women who were recruited online for sex and received cash payments, according to people close to the investigation and text messages and payment receipts reviewed by the New York Times. So the New York Times not only has sources within the DOJ that are telling them about this investigation, but they've also provided receipts. So this is not just an allegation that someone said something. They have reviewed physical evidence of text messages and receipts for this supposed crime. Just saying. Like, you can say what you want. That's pretty damning. Investigators believe Joel Greenberg, the former tax collector in Seminole County, Florida, who was indicted last year on a federal sex trafficking charge and other crimes, initially met the women through websites that connect people who go on dates in exchange for gifts, fine dining, travel, and allowances, according to 3 people with knowledge of the encounters. Mr. Greenberg introduced the women to Mr. Gaetz, who also had sex with them, the people said. So, Matt Gaetz' defense, which is irrelevant anyway, since the girl in question is purportedly underage. So, any defense goes out the window. That's illegal. But, regardless, the idea of a site where it's like a sugar daddy, sugar baby, explicitly stated, like, I will date you for gifts and favors. Like, that's, I would imagine, kind of legally dubious, considering prostitution or sex work in general. That's actual, like physical person to person. I'm not talking about, like, someone who's, like, a performer in adult content or has, like, an OnlyFans. I'm talking about, like, someone who actually, you know, is a, what's the correct word for someone who sleeps with people for money? I don't, because sex worker is a broad term. And I feel like prostitute is probably an outdated term. So I don't want an escort. Escort? Sure. Let's go with escort. Being an escort, having sex for money is illegal. Now, to be fair, I don't think it should be. I think if you're an adult, man or woman or whatever, I think you should have the right to do whatever you want with your body, as long as you're not hurting other people. I don't think sex work should be criminalized in any way, shape, or form. But the fact is, it is currently, and he's a sitting member of Congress. So, not great. One of the women who had sex with both men also agreed to have sex with an unidentified associate of theirs in Florida Republican politics, according to a person familiar with the arrangement. Ooh, please be DeSantis. Greenberg had initially contacted her online and introduced her to Mr. Gaetz, the person said. Gaetz denied ever paying women for sex. The Justice Department inquiry is also examining whether Mr. Gaetz had sex with a 17-year-old girl and whether she received anything of material value, according to 4 people familiar with the investigation. The sex trafficking count against Mr. Greenberg involved the same girl, according to 2 people briefed on the investigation. Yeah, that's where I'm not clear on the legality, like, you obviously, for legal reasons, can't go to someone and be like, I would like to pay you money to have sexual relations with me. Here is $500. Sleep with me. Illegal. But where's that line, right? Can you go to someone and be like, I will give you a diamond necklace to sleep with me? I imagine if you explicitly say something along those lines, that's probably solicitation. But how subtle would you have to be for it to get into a gray area? I don't know. I don't. Either way, the allegation is that she's underage. So that's a no-no, no matter what. Gaetz, 38, was elected to Congress in 2016 and became one of the President Donald J. Trump's most outspoken advocates. The Times has reviewed receipts from Cash App, a mobile payments app, and Apple Pay that show payments from Mr. Gaetz and Mr. Greenberg to one of the women, and a payment from Mr. Greenberg to a second woman. That's cash. That's definitely illegal. The women told their friends that the payments were for sex with the 2 men, according to 2 people familiar with the conversations. In encounters during the 2019 and 2020, Mr. Gaetz and Mr. Greenberg instructed the women to meet at certain times and places, often at hotels around Florida, and would tell them the amount of money they were willing to pay, according to the messages and interviews. Oh yeah, that's definitely considered escort services. One person said the men also paid in cash, sometimes withdrawn from a hotel ATM. See, again, I'm not advocating for whatever, but, like, This is what you do. You get cash from an ATM. Why in the world? This is like that time Jerry Springer got caught soliciting a sex worker because he paid with a personal check. Like, what? It's like people want to get caught. Some of the men and women took ecstasy in a legal mood-altering drug. Thanks, New York Times. Glad you explained what E was. Before having sex, including Mr. Gaetz, two people familiar with the encounter said. In some cases, Mr. Gaetz asked women to help find others who might be interested in having sex with him and his friends, according to two people familiar with the conversations. Should anyone inquire about their relationships, one person said, Mr. Gaetz told the women to say they had paid for hotel rooms and dinners as part of their dates. The FBI has questioned multiple women involved in the encounters, including as recently as January, to establish details of their relationships with Mr. Gaetz and his friends, according to text messages and two people familiar with the interviews. No charges have been brought against Mr. Gaetz, and the extent of his criminal exposure is unclear. Mr. Gaetz' office issued a statement on Thursday night in a response to a request for comment. Quote, Matt Gaetz had never paid for sex, yada yada, same statement as the previous articles. A lawyer for Mr. Greenberg, Fritz Scheller, declined to comment, as did a Justice Department spokesperson. It's not illegal to provide adults with free hotel stays, meals, and other gifts, but if prosecutors think they can prove that the payments to the women were for sex, they could accuse Mr. Gaetz of trafficking the women for, quote, force, fraud, or coercion. For example, prosecutors have filed trafficking charges against people suspected of providing drugs in exchange for sex, because feeding another person's drug habit could be seen as a form of coercion. It's also a violation of federal child sex trafficking laws to provide someone under 18 with anything of value in exchange for sex, which can include meals, hotels, drugs, alcohol, or cigarettes. A conviction carries a 10-year mandatory minimum prison sentence. Wouldn't it be funny if Gaetz went to jail for 10 years? The investigation stems from the Justice Department's continuing inquiry into Mr. Greenberg, who potentially faces decades in prison on 36 charges. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Central Florida initially secured an indictment against Mr. Greenberg in June, alleging that he had stalked a political rival and had used his elected office to create fake identification cards. During the investigation, the authorities discovered evidence that prompted them to broaden it, and Mr. Greenberg was indicted in August on sex trafficking charges. One of the sites the men and women went through was called Seeking Arrangement, which describes itself as a place where wealthy people find attractive companions and pamper them with, quote, fine dinners, exotic trips, and allowances. The site's founder has said it has 20 million members worldwide. The FBI mentioned the website in a conversation with at least one potential witness, according to a person familiar with the conversation. Mr. Greenberg was indicted this weekend on additional charges, accusing him of submitting false claims to receive pandemic relief aid from the government and trying to bribe a government official. The authorities said Mr. Greenberg undertook those efforts after he was initially indicted last summer. I wonder if Greenberg will flip on Gaetz. It seems like he's facing a lot of charges that they probably have pretty solid evidence for. So I wonder if they'd give him a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of a deal if he were to flip on Gaetz. Greenberg, who has pleaded not guilty to the earlier charges, is scheduled to go on trial in June. He was sent to jail in March for violating the terms of his bail. Gaetz said this week that his lawyers had been in touch with the Justice Department and that he was the subject, not the target, of an investigation. Subjects of investigations are often witnesses or people who might have information that could help the government pursue its targets, but it is common for that designation to shift over the course of an investigation. Yeah, I would imagine so. I only know that it has to do with women, Mr. Gaetz said. I have a suspicion that someone is trying to recategorize my generosity to ex-girlfriends as something more untoward. Mr. Gaetz, a lawyer, was first elected to the House of Representatives, representing the Florida Panhandle at age 34, son of a former president of the Florida State Senate. Gaetz attended Florida State University and William and Mary Law School before serving in the Florida State Legislature. Gaetz has sought to divert attention from the Justice Department investigation by claiming that he and his father were the targets of an extortion plot by two men trying to secure funding for a separate venture. The men, Robert Kent, a former Air Force intelligence officer who runs a consulting business, and Stephen Alford, a real estate developer who's been convicted of fraud, approached Mr. Gaetz' father, Don Gaetz, about funding their efforts to locate Robert A. Levinson, an American hostage held in Iran. They suggested to Don Gaetz that Mr. Levinson's successful return could somehow be used to secure a pardon for Matt Gaetz if he were charged with federal crimes, according to a copy of their proposed proposal provided to the Times. Oh no. Soon after, Don Gaetz hired a lawyer and contacted the FBI. Matt Gaetz said his father wore a wire and taped a meeting and a telephone conversation with Mr. Alford. An email exchange between Don Gaetz' lawyer and the Justice Department provided to the Times appears to confirm he was generally cooperating with the FBI as it looked into his claims. Sure, cooperating doesn't mean the same thing as the wire thing being true, but that would be interesting. Mr. Kent denied the Gaetz' assertions. He said he had heard rumors that Matt Gaetz might be under investigation and mentioned them only to sweeten his proposal. I told him I'm not trying to extort, but if this were true, he might be interested in doing something good, Mr. Kent said in an interview. Last year, the Trump administration notified the family of Mr. Levinson, a former FBI agent, that he had died while in captivity in Iran, where he disappeared in 2007 on an unauthorized mission from the CIA. But some people involved with the Levinson case continue to believe that he might still be alive, including Mr. Kent. He was stunned when he heard that Matt Gaetz had sought to tie the Justice Department investigation to an extortion plot related to the Levinson case. Quote, "He threw Levinson and the entire Levinson family under the bus," Mr. Kent said. "I can't imagine what these poor people have been through. This guy, to divert attention from himself, has ranked up the attention of the family." Don Gaetz also taped a phone call and a meeting with David McGee, a Levinson family lawyer, where they discussed the rescue proposal. In an interview, Mr. Gaetz denied any involvement and suggested Matt Gaetz was conflating the matter inappropriately with his own potential criminal liability. Quote, "He's trying to distract attention from a pending tidal wave that's about to sink his ship," Mr. McGee said. Interesting. Interesting stuff. Yeah, Fed's investigation of Matt Gaetz includes whether campaign funds were used to pay for travel expenses. Yeah, you don't want to fuck with campaign finance law either. It's one of the things they got Tiger King on. Remember Tiger King? Yeah, the whole Matt Gaetz situation is really messed up. It's gross. If he did do these crimes, and it seems like the FBI, or sorry, rather the Department of Justice has evidence to that effect, I really hope he doesn't get a slap on the wrist. I hope he actually serves justice, or justice is served in this case. Also, Matt Gaetz is a huge piece of trash, so if he could go away for about 10 years for criminal activity that he did, that'd be cool. That's all I have to say about it until more things happen, but we'll keep an eye on it.